Hello. Today we're reading for 30 minutes. This is the book. So I can help speak better. 30 minutes. Timer now. Part 1. The Communist Manifesto. Movements concocted their creeds from a mixture of Marxism and nationalism, while even in Northern and Western Europe, a blend of Keynesianism and moderate versions of socialist planning appeared to be in the second ascendant. In Britain in 1964, for example, the Prime Minister, Mr. Wilson, as champion of the forces of modernity, believed he had to produce a national plan to regenerate the country. Only the United States, and even there, only after a sustained period of presumption in the McCarthy era did the population appear immune to the appeal of socialism. Clearly, therefore, an understanding of the modern world appeared to require a knowledge of Marx, and Marx's message was mostly memorable, set out in the Communist Manifesto. But in the 1980s and the 1990s, the political landscape of this mid-20th century world was transformed beyond recognition. The fall of Berlin Wall in 1989, the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1992, and the extinction of communist parties everywhere outside China and the Southeast Asia brought to an abrupt end a Cold War that most had come to accept as part of the order of things. No one had anticipated that communism would make such a rapid and undignified exit from history. Socialist and social democratic parties had also been forced onto the defense. From the time of the events in Paris in May 1968, libertarians... Bro, what is this word? Oh, y'all can't see it. Libertarian, or something like that. Libertarian and anti-authoritarian, I don't know, movements have emerged both on the left and on the right. The rise of a new and more aggressive laissez-faire conservation, spearheaded by Miss Thatcher in Britain and President Reagan in the United States, brought to an end the post-Second World War consensus built upon exchange, stability, full employment, and Social Security. At the same time, the electoral basis of social democracy began to break up as traditional industrial occupations throughout the developing world disappeared in the face of a shift of manufacture to the third world. In addition, developments in electronics and information technology led to the downsizing of corporations, the casualizations of office employment, and yet more shedding of manual labor in the new era. A growing prosperity of the majority of wage earners in the advanced economies was accompanied by increasing insecurity and the merge of underclass lacking any useful function in the post-industrial economy. Traditional socialist and social democratic aspirations to shape the economy or to redistribute wealth were all but abandoned. The increase in female employment has made the language of the manifesto appear dated. Appeals for the unity of working men have all been seized. The growth of more individual political concerns and the proliferation of single-issue campaigns have made the ambition to turn the working classes into a party appear incomprehensible. Belief in the possibility or even the desirability of a future communist society has become extinct. In this new era, the manifesto can no longer command automatic attention, and its importance needed to be throughout afresh. Page 6. Become one of a very small number of political texts, Plato Republic, Machiavelli's Prince, Hobbes' Leviathan, Rousseau's Social Contract, maybe others. That even centuries after the original composition still retain the power to shock. Or will it? Like the communist movement, it once aspired shrink in importance until it is little more than an object of curiosity for specialists in the history of political thought. To this question, there is one simple answer. The manifesto will remain a classic if only because of its briefs, but still quite unsurpassed deposition of modern capitalism. Marx was the first to evoke the seemingly limitless powers of the modern economy and its truly global reach. He was first to chart staggering transformation produced in less than a century by the emergence of a world market and the unleashing of the unparalleled production powers of the modern industry. He also delineated the endlessly inchoate. What is that word? Hold on. Let me search that word up. Inchoate. We're learning the word today. Hold on. Just begun and so not fully formed or developed. Inchoate. New word I just learned. Inchoate and incessantly relentless and unfinished character of a modern capitalism as a phenomenon. He emphasized its inherent tendency to invent new needs and the means to satisfy them, its subversion of all inherited cultural practices and beliefs, its regard of all boundaries, whether sacred or secular, its destabilization of every hallowed hierarchy, whether of ruler and ruled, man or woman, or parent and child, its turning of everything into an object for sale. In short, the manifesto sketches a vision of reality that at the start of a new millennium and against a background of endless chatter of globalization and deregulation, looks as powerful and contemporary a picture of our own world as it might be appear to those reading it in 1848. In the period of before 1870, political economists were slow to recognize the transforming power of industrialization because they remained haunted by fears of overpopulation and the specter of diminishing returns. It was left to socialists in the 1830s and in the 1840s, particularly the followers of Robert Owen, as postals of what was then called social science, to identify themselves with the prospect of abundance and the possibility of a social free from scarcity. But these potentialities were identified with social cooperation. They were not usually associated with the market, which was denounced as a system of unequal exchange of the war of all against all, or of buying cheap and selling dear. From this position, it was easy to slip back into a nostalgia for a simpler society with predictable expectations and fixed needs. What was unusual, if not unique, about the manifesto, this is by no means true of all Marx's other writings, was the unflinching modernist vision in which the capitalist world market was not simply identified with the establishment, page 8, and exploitation, but also with a liberating power, the power to release people from backwardness and traditional bound dependence. The continual process of innovation, the incessant invention of new needs, and the creation of new markets have not ceased and since the time the manifesto was written. The tendency towards limitless expansions remains, even if it was now hindered by environmental dangers as it once was by diminishing returns. Communism, as subsequent his story was to prove, was not the answer to contradictory tendencies at work in the world depicted by the manifesto. But whatever is said about the rest of the manifesto, its great achievement was to have built its theory upon a high, distinctive, and strikingly novel vision of the modern world that, for all the immense changes of a century and a half, still remains visibly our own. The case for historical importance of the manifesto is also powerful. for a century or more is now seemingly extraordinary theory of history as a class struggle leading eventually towards the triumph of world communism constitution, a credo embraced by thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of adherents in every part of the world. Hold on, let me search this word up too. I never heard of this word in my life. Yeah, y'all want to hear it?
Enunciate.
Oh, enunciate. Oh, I'm dumb as fuck. Say or pronounce clearly. Oopsies. Yo, I lost my page. I lied. Found it. Enunciate not as a statement of principle or an expression of desire, but as set as of predictions, the formulations of the manifesto underpin the creation of a worldwide labor movement in the last third of the 19th century and in the 20th century, fueled many of political struggles and not a few of wars. That tore the world apart from 1917 to 1989. A more diluted form of the view of history expressed in the manifesto also made an impact far beyond the ranks of socialists and communists. It profoundly affected both the writing of history and the understanding of society among those without any direct acquaintance with the works of Marx. In place of battle of ideas and creeds, it substituted the clash of social forces judging according to the goal of amendment or eventual social revolution. The materialist conception of history that Marx and Engels applied to the history of communism in the manifesto also gained wide acceptance beyond the ranks of communists, and it was to generate a mode of social and historical understanding which continues even after communism itself has begun to fade into history. Even now, for example, a spectrum stretching from despairing veterans of the old left to brash new champions of the free enterprise right have appeared to agree that the development of world capitalism encountered only one major challenge in its history, that of revolution socialism representing the industrial working class. Both groups appear to conclude that with the final overcoming of this challenge, the future progress of an unconstrained and fully globalized capitalism will proceed unimpeded. If this short-term stock-taking after the World War reveals the lingering after effects of the manifesto, so perhaps a more stylish level does the stance adopted by certain page 10 strand of post-modernist writing. This is the approach of all those French and American theorists who have concluded that because the clash right over communism is over, history itself must have come to an end. One way to encounter such conclusions is to point out the challenges to the global development of laissez-faire capitalism did not begin with industrial and revolutionary socialism. Nor is it likely that the collapse of communism and the end of industrial epoch will bring about their disappearance. Already the end of millennium has witnessed the beginnings of other and differently inspired attempts to set the global economic system within a more sustainable and ethically acceptable framework. But the best answer to this kind of postmodernism is to draw attention to the forgotten sequence of events which resulted in the construction of the grand historical narrative associated with Marx. An investigation into the construction of Manifesto can explain how this still compelling vision of the world was first stitched together. Such an explanation requires the telling of a rather lengthy and complicated story. But the story is important because it makes clear that much of what was first put forward in the manifesto and later accepted as a common sense understanding and of the making of the modern world belongs more to the realm of mythology than fact. In particular, such an account will show that what became Marxan socialism in Germany in the beginning had nothing to do with industrial or the social and political aspirations of industrial workers. On the contrary, it emerged from debates among radical disciples. Disciples of the German philosopher Hegel about what should replace Christianity or Hegel's racialized variants of its absolute spirit. Furthermore, when seen in a larger European perspective, this emergence of German socialism out of a movement of religious reform was not particularly surprising. Socialism had also emerged out of post-Christian movements of religious reform in Britain and France at the beginning of the 19th century. In a manifesto, Marx and Engels made a successful effort to cover of those religious tracts and to set in their page 12. Page 12. Place a socio-economics genealogy appropriate to their new communist self-image. In fact, as this introduction will show that they only not wrote of the religious prehistory of communism, but also any form of intellectual prehistory. There was therefore no mention of manifesto intellectual debt to German classical historians, nor to the so-called German historical school of law on the history of forms of ownerships to Adam Smith or Simone de Sismondi of the operation of commercial society. Damn. To Proudhon's criticism of both property and community, to development within the 17th natural law tradition of a historical conception both of community and of private property, in the drafting of manifesto, any reference to these ideas, religious or secular, disappeared. Attention was deflected from socialist or communist ideas into the social forces supposedly represented by them. In this way, the history of socialism or communism appeared to become synonymous with the emergence of industrial proletariat and a transition to modern society, starting from the Industrial Revolution in Britain and spreading to Europe and North America. Wars and revolutions became byproducts of the social and political struggles engendered by the global industrializing process. But despite the manifesto, socialism or communism was never to become synonymous with the outcome of the proletariat. The speculative or quasi-religious origins and the character of socialist creeds, including that built upon the pronouncements of the manifesto itself, continues to shine. Through the laborious, elaborated socio-economic facade, it was not the mere fact of proletarianization that generated the wars and revolution of the 20th century, but the experience of social and political upheaval shaped and articulated the millenniums and I don't know this word, I'm gonna skip it. Languages of communism and revolutionary socialism. For this reason, historians have rightly likened the passions, interests, and extremism of 20th century revolutions to the religious wars of the 16th century. Blah blah blah. Hold on, my phone. Similar reasoning also needed to be applied to the question of socialist decline in the second half of the 20th century. Although the crisis of socialist doctrine and the collapse of communist states were clearly hastened by political, military, and socio-economic factors, the marked secularization of political beliefs in the decades after 1950 was equally important, right? The end of communism was not the end of history, but the end of epoch in which criticism of global capitalism overlapped with the rise of the fall powerism, organized post-Christianity, in the name of science, addressed itself to the oppressed. Pausing it right quick. Paused it. I paused this. I'm back. I'm pausing the timer. I had to put my low power mode on because my phone about to die. Back to reading. I know where I'm at. Continue to shine. Yeah. Through the laboriously elaborated... Wait. No, I read this. Page 14. Of class struggles, proletarians have nothing to lose except their chains. Working men of all countries unite. But the power of the manifesto did not simply consist of those memorable phrases, nor could it be claimed that its impact derived from its overall design. The last section was hurriedly jotted down and looks unfinished, while the third section, despite its occasionally brilliant jibes, derived from its overall design. This last section was hurriedly jotted down and looks unfinished, while the third section, despite its occasionally brilliant jibes, it's arbitrarian and sectarian. Undoubtedly, then its power is concentrated in the first two sections, propelled forward by the caustic and apparently undividing logic of its argument, and unlived by its startling rhetorical. Notice word rhetorical. Yep, shifts. Each paragraph still preserves the capacity to surprise and disconcert. Even now, and certainly in the 1840s, readers of a manifesto might have expected to find, as they would have found in an earlier draft composed by Frederick Engels, as a declaration of the principles of communism, or even in a yet earlier version proposed by another member of the Communist League, Moses Hess, a communist confession in the 1840s. As will become clear, communism was overwhelmingly identified either with a radical traditions of Christianity or with the extremes of Jacobin rationalism. Deriving from the French Revolution, the starting point of the manifesto is quite different. It opens with a sustained tribute to its declared antagonist, the very epitome of private property and egoism, the bourgeois and modern bourgeois society. The bourgeois had accomplished wonders far surpassing Egyptian pyramids, Roman aqueducts, and the Gothic cathedrals. In a mere 100 years, it had created more massive and more colossal products, forces than have all preceding revolutions. How'd it fall? Fix this. It looked good. My fault. Colossal productives, blah, 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 blah. If modern bourgeois society were now approaching its end and about to yield to its opposite, communism, it was not because of the failings of the bourgeois, but because of its triumph. This end was nigh like the sorcerer who is no longer able to control the powers of neither world, whom he has been caught up by spells. The bourgeois, through the very magnitude of the material advance which it accomplished, have forged the weapons that bring death to itself. It also called into existence the men who are to wield those weapons, the modern class, working class, the proletarians. The first section then concludes with... Why does it keep falling? Why does my phone keep falling? Where was I? Boom, boom, boom. Boom, I was reading this. The first section... Modern industry, or the Industrial Revolution, the great bourgeois achievement that had replaced the isolation of the laborers with their revolutionary combination into a group. The fall of the bourgeois and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable. The second section is no less striking. Throw Wally. They walkie. Page 16. Different in tone and a remarkable switch from epic to bathos, the scene shifts from the factory in the counting house to the Brigia's interior. There the Brigia stands no longer a Herculean artificer, a world transformer, rather a self-pitying paternalist, familist, a wheedling householder wiping the cold sweat of fear from his brow and wiggling his putty hands in an entry to escape the retribution which communism is sure to bring. Despite its title, Proletarians and Communists, this section mainly consists of an imaginary dialogue between the communists and the bourgeois, a dialogue in which the facade of the communist spectre is the Latin. In all its most lurid and flesh-creeping detail, the passage it's both bittering and teasing. Most of the wild charges against communists that they practice the community of women, the abolition of nationality, the destruction of property and civilization are thrown back at the bourgeois' feet. A few the communists cheerfully accept, if therefore the spectre is exorcised. It is in a wholly unreassuring manner for the bourgeois. Hello, I ran out of storage, my fault. Still 3:20, I have it paused. Let's continue reading. The playful sadism of this passage in turn only made possible by a third and equally arresting feature of the manifesto. The changed identity of the communists. It is no longer the communists who threatens the bourgeois. Communists take no personal responsibility for amendment, expropriation of the bourgeois, and even the proletarian will only be playing a role which history has assigned to it. Communists are no longer those who espouse a particular set of ideas or principles. They merely express in general terms actually relations springing from existing class struggle, from historical movements going on under our very eyes. This historical movement is an expression of the revolution of modern productive forces against modern conditions of production, against the property relations that are the conditions for the existence of bourgeois and of its rule. The sole defining feature of the communist is a clear awareness of this fact. The communist, therefore, is one who has the advantage of clearly understanding the line of march. The conditions and ultimate general results of the proletarian movement. Among these ultimate general results are the disappearance of class distinctions and the concentration, of all production in the hands of the associate individuals, or as later English version excuse me, I ate some halal food. Chicken over rice. Associate individuals, or the later English termed of as a vast association of the whole nation. Eventually, the public power will lose its political character, and in place of the old bourgeois society, which is classes and class antagonism, there will arise an association in which the free, page 18, development of each is the condition for the free development of all. Where these audacious claims the product of a single process of reasoning, or did a semblance of theoretical unity conceal a more contingent and ad hoc assemblage of derived from different sources? Why should a declaration of communism have placed such emphasis upon the world-transforming achievements of the bourgeois? Why should it have been imagined that existing social and political systems were unreformable, or that periodic economic crises were signs of the impending end of the property system as a whole? Why should it have been assumed that there were a particular affinity between the grievances of workers and the goals of communism? Finally, why should it have been believed that a historical process governed by not by ideals but by the clash of materially contending interests, the class struggle would nevertheless deliver such desirable result. Until recently, straightforward answers to those rather obvious questions would have been hard to find. A history of the reception of Manifesto, both of its changing political uses and of the changing meaning attached to its theory, will help to explain why these questions were so rarely put. From the very beginning, interest and promotion of the Manifesto seems to have been governed by a concern its immediate political goals rather than its ultimate communist ends, hurriedly written by Marx on the basis of earlier drafts by Engels in the first few weeks of 1848. The Manifesto appeared within a days of general European revolution stretching from the Baltic to the Balkans. But despite, or perhaps because of this accident of timing, its immediate impact was muffled. Written in German, only one edition appeared in 1848 amid the uncertainties. Revolutionary appeals, plans to translate the document into 5 languages at the beginning of the text were so abandoned, and in Germany the authors themselves found good reason to downplay both proposals of the Manifesto and the party it was supposed to represent, indeed almost as soon as the revolutions of 1848 had. That's done reading for today. I'm going to read tomorrow, 30 minutes. I'm going to keep going up 30, an hour. Yeah, just keep tuning in.